If this finds you, stop scrolling. This is not accidental. This message has been peeled from the noise and set down before you as if someone or something has already read what you could not yet say about yourself. Mark the moment. Notice the place where you are breathing now, the way the world feels on the inside of you, tight or spacious, heavy or strangely quiet. This is an invitation and an account. There are 7 self-concepts inside you that, when called forth, will alter your direction so profoundly that you cannot simply return to who you were. Read that sentence again, not as a threat but as a fact of orientation. There are thresholds in the soul. When you cross them, the landscape behind you no longer fits your feet. This teaching names those 7. Think of them not as labels you must believe, but as archetypal contours of identity already forming in secret within you. They are symbolic, powerful, and precise in their effect. They are not a club that excludes others. They are a description of a condition, a readiness. If any of this resonates, if the description scratches a place that has been tender for years, then mark it. Write 99 on a scrap of paper, or press like. Do this as a private seal. No ritual promises, only a witness to an inner commitment. Keep that as the first small agreement between you and what is becoming possible. You will know you are being called by the way life has been shaping you. The world has not been merely random with you. It has been testing pressure points, narrowing doors, returning you again and again to the same hall where different choices are demanded. You have felt cycles. Opportunities that once burned bright are fading into patterns of near misses. Your intuition is sharper than your applause. You have endured without notice. You have been misunderstood by those who loved you, and yet a stubborn center within you has refused the easy comforts that would dull the ache. These are not failures. They are diagnostics. Listen to the 7 self-concepts as mirrors. Each name an aspect, each description a way the inner life is being asked to graduate. First, the enduring self. This part of you is not heroic in a cinematic sense. It is quiet, patient, and abrasive to praise. It survives long stretches without compliments, and when praise arrives, it feels like a foreign currency. The enduring self tolerates pressure without collapsing into neediness. It has learned to carry weight because there has been no other choice, and that tolerance becomes qualification. In practical terms, this looks like staying at a job that offers no mirror for your effort, remaining loyal through seasons of misunderstanding, and still showing up with a steady hand. If you recognize this pattern, you have been practicing the economy of endurance. Second, the silent witness. This is the part of you that watches your own life almost clinically. It notices patterns before you shout them out. It records the recurring failures, the same heartbreak replayed, the small betrayals. The silent witness does not judge loudly. It collects evidence. You might have the uncanny experience of seeing yourself act before the world has named your role. There's a stillness in the center of you that catalogs what is true. When this self is active, you are less giddy for immediate confirmation and more attuned to long arcs. Third, the scarred loyalist. Wounds have taught you what fidelity costs. You no longer pledge your allegiance easily, but when you do, you give a steadfastness that refuses to abandon what is honest. The scarred loyalist knows betrayal intimately and will not repeat it lightly. That knowing can harden into suspicion if untended, but in its highest expression, it becomes a moral anchor. It is not binded to the past for nostalgia's sake. Rather, it converts pain into a new criteria for whom and what to allow near your life. Fourth, the hungry imaginator. This is the inner faculty that refuses to be limited by the visible evidence. It fashions futures quietly, like a potter working clay in the dark. You may have experienced vivid inner scenes, conversations that seem to happen behind your eyes, not as escapism but as rehearsal. The hungry imaginator does not need an audience. It anticipates states of being and draws them close by living them inwardly first. This is Neville Goddard's bedrock notion reframed here. Imagination is not mere fancy. It is the laboratory of becoming. Treat it as practice, not entertainment. Fifth, the unseen integrator. While the silent witness records and the imaginator rehearses, the unseen integrator stitches the private experiments into the fabric of your outward life. It acts slow and incremental. It is responsible for those quiet moments when a thought aligns with behavior, and a new habit becomes less deliberate and more natural. The unseen integrator is a seamstress of identity, and its work is often invisible until others begin to recognize the change in you. Then they call it charisma, maturity, or luck.
In truth, it is steady integration. Sixth, the resolute moralist. This self-concept is not about dogma or perfection. It is about consistency under pressure, doing what you know to be right when nobody will check your ledger. The resolute moralist refuses shortcuts that would speed external success at the expense of inner steadiness. It is the part of you that keeps promises to yourself. When it is strong, you make decisions based on a deeper standard, and you are willing to lose small comforts to preserve an inner clarity. Seventh, the threshold bearer. Perhaps the most precise of all, the threshold bearer is the part of you that accepts initiation. It recognizes that identity must be tested and often broken to be remade.
It is courageous in the sense of willingness, willing to be stripped, willing to be misunderstood, willing to pass alone through a darkness that refines rather than annihilates. The threshold bearer is the piece that says, in the face of erosion, I can endure this and be forged by it. These concepts are not a linear checklist to tick off and then boast about. They are facets of a single inner process. You may find 2 of them stronger, 3 unfolding, and others merely dreams. The point is not to finish them like errands. It is to allow them to converge. When they align, something changes irreversibly. If you are listening closely, you will notice a particular rhythm to your life that has led here. It begins with cycles, patterns that return like tides. You step forward, then something unseen repositions the pieces, and you are returned to the shore to try again with a new tide. Those cycles are not punishment, they are assessment. Imagine a crucible where metal is put through repeated heating and cooling. Each pass refines impurities. Life's repetition functions the same way, as if some higher intelligence is sampling the metal of you, testing whether the composition will hold under heat. Call that intelligence what you will, an inner mechanism, the observer of your soul, destiny's sieve. Name it reverently and metaphorically, a system that measures endurance by temperature, fidelity by friction, and imagination by the quietness with which it can carry the dream. What does testing look like in daily detail? It looks like doors closing that you thought were open. It looks like being left out of conversations you expected to be invited into. It looks like an inexplicable delay that pushes your plans farther than you can comfortably manage. It looks like relationships that thin out rather than bulge, even though you have been generous. These are the filters at work. They separate what is supplemental from what will be central to your next self-concept. Let me offer a short example, a vignette that will clarify how the mechanism tends to operate. There was a woman named Mara, a name I borrow only to render a human shape, who had spent 10 years pouring herself into a small community arts project. She was tireless, unpaid much of the time, and often invisible to the funders who took credit when success arrived. Each time she applied for larger grants, the applications were misplaced, rejected, or delayed. Friends advised her to pivot, to sell her skills as a consultant, to find easier recognition elsewhere. Yet Mara continued with a patient, stubborn insistence on the project's inner value. Over time, one by one, the peripheral supporters drifted away during seasons of scarcity. The grant windows closed frequently just before decisions. Friends who once praised her work grew distant. At a certain point, the project structure collapsed, funding evaporated, and the small team disintegrated. For many, this would have been a failure. For Mara, the collapse became a rupture. The project had done its work in shaping her capacity. Stripped of external scaffolding, she found that the practice of creating without applause had retooled her. She had developed a resilience that could carry a larger, less flattering labor. Later, when a different opportunity arrived, one that required quiet tenacity, moral clarity, and the ability to hold a future with few visible signs, she was ready. The same qualities that had looked like punishment were precisely what qualified her. This is the paradox at the heart of the testing. The world insists on pressure to illuminate what you will do with the inner heat. The rupture is the crucial scene. It is the moment when what once held you together begins to fail, not because you are incompetent, but because the old identity cannot contain what is being born. Imagine the familiar scaffolding of a building being deliberately removed so that the new architecture can stand on its own foundations. The rupture can feel like collapse, emptiness, grief, a collapse of routine, loss of identity anchors. You may notice a tightening in the chest, a solitude that is not merely loneliness, but a necessity. People will ask what happened, and you may not be able to answer because the thing that happened is interior and irrevocable. This is initiation, not defeat. In that instant, many choose retreat. They scramble to rebuild the old structures, the relationships, the comfortable habits, the known compromises, because the blackness of the rupture is frightening. Others choose a different way. They stand at the threshold and say silently, I will allow this to break me for the sake of who I am meant to become. That choice is not easy. It is a moral act.
It requires endurance, imagination, and a willingness to be misunderstood. It is the moment when the 7 aspects we named can converge. Endurance meets imagination, witness meets integration, loyalty meets moral resolve, and the threshold bearer says yes. This is where the teaching tightens into the activation. Observation ends, activation begins. Think of observation as a long period where patterns were being collected, evaluated, and measured against your inner constitution. Activation is when that data forms a new operating system within you. You cannot unsee what was observed. The world reforms around new priorities because you will now live by them. That is what I mean when I say plainly and without flourish. You can't go back. Saying you can't go back does not mean the past will vanish. It means the strategies you once used to survive will no longer suffice. You might still love the same people, work in similar spaces, or wear similar clothes, but your interior criteria will change. Decisions you would have once tolerated you will no longer permit. You will lose friends who cannot travel with you through the new lengthening of your attention. You will find that temporary comforts feel hollow.
The irreversibility is moral and psychological. Your thresholds have been raised. That is a burden as well as a blessing. Higher capacity requires higher containment. You will be asked to hold more without collapse, to choose fidelity over convenience, to refuse temptations that could reroute your development for immediate ease. The practical expression of this truth is not dramatic external success. It is steadiness under trial, a capacity for deeper commitments, and an imaginative life that becomes the fertile ground of action. How does activation look day to day? It looks like simpler choices made with greater integrity. It looks like an imagination disciplined by fidelity. You imagine not for escape, but for rehearsal. It looks like saying no to certain invitations that dilute your purpose, even if those invitations would look attractive to the outside eye. It looks like a willingness to be unseen for longer spans, because you know the duration matters more than applause. At the moment of activation, you will feel a pull to mark the passage. Rituals are human ways of creating a physical anchor for an interior decision. If you have already written 99 or pressed like at the beginning, you have made an initial symbolic seal. I invite you now, as a conscious act, to form another small covenant with yourself. You do this alone, quietly. Sit for a breath and say, in your own words, I accept that my life will call for greater clarity and that I will carry it. Write it down if you wish. Keep the paper. This is not a magic key that forces outcomes. It is a witness that you remember the moment you agreed to accept the work. Keep the symbol as a reminder, not as a guarantee. As activation widens, notice the tests will not stop. They will become thinner and more surgical. Pressure will be more precise. Old coping mechanisms will be revealed and offered. A familiar pattern resurfaces not by accident, but to show you whether you have integrated the lesson. At each moment you will be asked, will you choose the higher contour of your character, or will you settle for the immediate relief? Each answer is a small initiation. Over time, the accumulative effect is visible, not because the universe rewards you with spectacle, but because you begin to live from a new core, and the world must obey the contours of the person you have become. A cautionary note is necessary. This is not an invitation to isolation as a moral badge. Solitude may be a tool for deep formation, but it is not an excuse to sever responsible relationships or to shun care. Hold accountable people close. Seek wise counsel when confusion is deep. This path asks for inner integrity, not brittle pride. Do not equate endurance with reckless neglect of your bodily, psychological, or relational needs. The threshold bearer is brave, but not foolish. There is strength in asking for help. There is humility in therapy, medicine, community, when such resources are needed. The invitation here is to accept the initiation of identity, not to romanticize suffering. There may be a temptation to read every hardship as evidence of selection. Resist the superstition. Some tests are random, some pains are not initiation. Use the 7 self-concepts as diagnostic tools. Do they describe how you are changing, or are they a narrative you want to impose on confusion? The difference is felt. When the description fits, it will land with an unsettling clarity. When it does not fit, it will feel forced. Allow discernment to be kind, not dismissive. The metaphor of a higher mechanism is potent and useful. Frame it as interpretive rather than a hard metaphysical fact. You are entering a life that calls for new terms of responsibility. If the 7 find you, if you recognize the enduring self, the silent witness, the scarred loyalist, the hungry imaginator, the unseen integrator, the resolute moralist, and the threshold bearer within you, then know this: your agency is real and your consent matters.
You will be required to practice moral clarity in the small things, to live imaginatively with discipline, and to hold steady in silence when applause is absent. That is the cost of being chosen, and it is also the gift. You will be asked to become more trustworthy to yourself. In time, others will be able to rely on you in ways they could not before. You will carry less of the noise of performance, and more of the quietness of presence. Before I close, a final practical alignment. Choose one small daily practice that honors your activation. It need not be elaborate. It might be 5 minutes of disciplined imagination each morning, a vivid scene of living the day you want, experienced fully from the inside. It might be a brief nightly inventory where you ask, where did I choose convenience over clarity today? Name one correction and carry it forward. The practice is not magical, it is programming. Over months, these tiny acts compose a new neural and moral architecture. They are the arithmetic of irreversible change. And remember the seal you made at the beginning, that small, private gesture. Keep it not as a warranty, but as a reminder of the moment you consented to carry the heavier life. Keep it like an old promise folded in a pocket. When trials come and the old ways call you back, unfold that fold and read the handwriting of a self that chose the longer road. One final word of consolation. Being chosen is weighty, and the weight will sometimes feel unbearable. That is part of becoming. Allow compassion to yourself in those hours. Tenderness is not surrender. It is the healing balm that allows the threshold bearer to stand again. You are not meant to be flawless. You are meant to be reliably becoming. This path asks for patience and a disciplined imagination, a capacity to endure and a capacity to forgive yourself when you falter.
If this landed, if the description of the 7 self-concepts has resonated, and you feel the interior shift beginning, subscribe for deeper guidance, and visit the playlist titled Activation Work, where we explore practical steps to live from these concepts. Share this with someone who has been asking difficult questions about themselves, not as a claim that they are better, but as an offering. Sometimes a clear language helps us see what has already been true. The world will continue to test. Your work is to become the person who answers those tests with grace and steady imagination. You cannot go back, and that is how you are made ready.